come no fuck them with the burner, put them with the burner, put them with the put them with the burner, put them with the burner, put them come no fuck them with the burner, put them with the burner, put them with the put them with the burner, put them with the burner, put them come no fuck them with the burner, put them with the burner, put them with the put them with the burner, put them original.
Good things. It's like Christmas morning.
This is Job Praise Whitewater, and I'm your host, Nick Turner, for this celebration of whitewater paddling and the legends who have shaped our sport. Job Praise Whitewater is brought to you by Kayak Session Magazine, the international whitewater magazine. This magazine is a true work of art. If you've never picked one up before, go to the local shop, find one, and look through, and you will be amazed at what the sport is doing right now. If you want to find out what the latest expeditions are going on all around the world, it's in Kayak Session Magazine in the news section. If you want to find out in-depth articles on the latest exploits of the very best paddlers in the world, it's in Kayak Session Magazine. The artwork, the photography is on another level from anything you've ever seen. The founder of Kayak Session Magazine, Toon, Philippe, anyone who's been in the industry very long knows him well and knows that nobody is more true to the sport. So if you want to support the sport, see what all the latest people are doing, and get the very best eye candy available on earth in the sport of whitewater kayaking, then do yourself a favor, go to kayaksession.com and pony up some of those dollars, drink a few less PBRs, and get yourself a subscription. Your buddies will bring beer over to come read the magazine at your house. Kayak Session Magazine, the international whitewater magazine. Today, really happy to have here Ben Stookesberry, guy who in his first movies putting out was calling himself No Big Names and has evolved into quite possibly the most prolific expedition paddler ever. So going to sit down with Ben here and have a talk about his life in whitewater and how it all came about. So welcome, Ben, and let's kick off with kind of who was your first crew that got you into kayaking and really got that love in you?
Yeah, well, my first crew was Eric Seymour and Ashland Mine Productions, all the boys out of Southern Oregon. I actually started in Moab, Utah, but really it was like when you find your first Class 5 crew, that's when the whole thing really starts. That's when you really realize like just how much opportunity there is in river running. And so it was, let's see, Eric Seymour, Chris Larson, Chris Mangus was a part of our original crew. Samantha Glace. We had several female paddlers with us. Jill, Amy Jimerson. We had some rafters with us, Andy Buckingham, Joe Ellis. Another kayaker that was mostly our cinematographer and that taught me how to do a little video editing was Brent Button, and he was really the mastermind behind Ashland Mine Productions. I should mention Judd Lehman, Brandon Buell. We had a good crew of we were collectively like the No Big Names. That was a time in the early 2000s when there was there's the Theo Bermans of the world. There was the Scott Lindgrens of the world, the playboaters that were traveling the world, making names for themselves. And we were just like, fuck all that, man. Like, we're going out there and nearly drowning every time we go out on these Class 5 rivers. Like, it isn't about us. It's about the rivers. And so that was kind of like the underpinnings of it. We were just like big group of friends, bunch of no-names. And that's, I think, where No Big Names came from.
Yeah, it makes sense. That really was this era of just explosion in the sport and all all the names. I don't think there's been as many names since then. Right.
I guess I should mention, yeah, Lisa Dickinson. She was in our crew too. She kind of spanned both worlds. She was up in Bozeman hanging with the Nerpers, and she came down and she boat with us too. So we had some crossovers between our two crews. But yeah, I remember, I think we were coming out with our films like right similar time. Maybe Nerpoo came out a year ahead of No Big Names, or the same year. Either you guys were a year ahead or the same time. But ours was like, the most bottom of the barrel, like VHS, as opposed to like the 16 millimeter that the Nerpoo came out on. So yeah, we definitely had a little chip on our shoulder as well. We were just like, we didn't know what the hell we were doing.
We were just same kind of crew, and just walked into TGR one day and said, "You guys should make kayaking movies, and we should be the kayakers." And they're like, "Well, here, we'll loan you this camera. Go film some stuff and see what you come back with." And we actually went and filmed I think it was the first descent of Big Timber. It might have been the second descent. My brother had run a bunch of it, but not the big drops years before. But then I think it was one of the first full descent. I think it was, the first time Big Timber Falls was run, all that stuff. And we brought it back to them, and they're like, "Holy shit, yeah, that's sweet. Let's go with it." And
yeah. I mean, it hasn't been too long ago that they did another like pretty high end shoot there. I mean, it's still a benchmark in kayaking. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's still a benchmark. It's funny, those ones.
I still haven't run it. I still haven't run it.
You drive down there late June, early July sometime. It's a good time.
I was there just before the tongue thing. Boomer and I were down there scouting tongue and Big Goose and the Bighorns, and we showed up and it was like heavy snow and the river was high. I was like, screw that, man. That thing looks dangerous. But the locals were there, of course, sending.
Well, it's those slidey ones, right? They look so huge, but then they go a lot smoother than you think.
Yeah.
Except high water, right? They get the big holes. But, well, man, it's only a tenth as terrifying to me as the tongue, and those things are gnarly. Just sieved out. So yeah, so what, you guys kind of started traveling around, doing a lot of different runs all around, and then you had the No Big Names movies, and then did you guys keep going a while, or when did kind of the National Geographic Explorer thing come along, and how did that go?
Yeah, so we did 3 years of No Big Names films, and then it was sort of the natural time for that crew to sort of go its separate ways. We were all 3 years out of college at that point, and people were getting normal jobs, and but Eric and I were still going with it, and so we had gotten an invitation from Eric Link to join up with the Twitch crew, and so we joined them for what was the fifth installment of Twitch 5, and I think that was sort of a big step away from the No Big Names mentality, was joining up with Teo and that whole scene. But Teo and I just didn't get along. He just, like, I don't know. I was just like not at all attracted to what really, I mean, he was just really there for like the stunt boating. And I had really just found my love for expedition kayaking, for overnight kayaking. I'd done my first real expedition wasn't until what I consider to be my first real expedition. I mean, we had gone to Chiapas, Mexico in 2002 and done some overnight kayaking and had some close encounters with some pretty rambunctious Zapatistas at that time that were trying to control the rivers on their land, and keep the foreigners off of it, or at least get a control on who was entering and exiting their lands. So that was a really like intriguing facet. All of a sudden we were coming, face to face with this indigenous group that was still trying to exert their autonomy. And then, but in 2005...
But on that story, so they actually kind of took you, like, made you come to their place, right? Maybe talk a little more. I heard bits about that story, like, oh, Ben taken captive by Chiapas rebels or whatever was the headline. But what is kind of a little more in-depth on that story?
Yeah, and I don't think that one made any headlines. There was a French-Canadian paddling group, and this was back in 2002, that had been, let's see, I don't want to say taken captive. They had been pulled over to shore, and then they had all of their gear. They were a rafting group, and they had all of their gear taken by the Zapatistas. And so we were going down this same river. That's too bright, probably. We were going down this same river called the Hatate. And sure enough, after we did the upper section and floating this 20-mile section of flat water that's between there and the lower canyon, we were spotted, and they came out in longboats and started pulling us to shore. And at that point, we were all in our single raft. It was myself, Eric Seymour, Brandon Buell, and Joe Ellis. And so we had all gotten in the raft. We were all paddling the raft. They came out and started pulling us to shore, a bunch of guys with machetes. And we ended up cutting the rope and paddling all night into the safety of the second canyon. And eventually got downstream through the second canyon. That night, like, we had a puma jump off the wall and scare the shit out of us. Came out of the second canyon, sure that they were going to be waiting for us to take us hostage, I guess, is what we were thinking. And instead, there was a Mexican military base right there. And they ended up giving us a ride 8 hours out to the nearest town after our buddy kind of faked a broken arm injury. But yeah, I mean, that was just really intriguing. That was like, there's so much more going on here than just sick rapids. Because there were, I mean, that particular river, the Hatate, is just incredible river. We were told, we were on a 2-month road trip from Colorado all the way south to the Guatemalan border. And we had run into a guy in Veracruz, Mexico, an old gringo that was like, yeah, it's like the Zambezi with drops. And man, like, we were there, we didn't get there until December, so the water wasn't quite that high, but you could see it's just like a huge riverbed with all these travertine slides, not the size of the travertine drops that you get on like the Agua Azul or the Santo Domingo, but like a huge riverbed. And then, going through these indigenous wild areas that, haven't been properly taken over by modernity. Like, it's like time traveling. And so for me, like, going park and hiking with Teo, just like, that wasn't what I was personally after. And so the next year, Eric, the final paddling partner from that original No Big Names Ashland Mine Productions crew, he was ready to settle down in Jackson Hole. He had met a girl, and then I was like alone, and so that was a huge turning point in my kayaking career. Was in 2005. I met up with Jesse Coombs, and we went on a mission to go back to Chiapas and run a river that we had seen at the very end of that first trip called the Santo Domingo.
One
And
of the
it
legendary
was,
first descents that's been done, probably right up there.
yeah, yeah. And, I think that it was a legendary first descent, but one that needs an asterisk next to it because like there was a paddling crew of a previous generation of paddlers that had gone through there and just portaged every single one of the drops and apparently portaged their way all the way through the canyon. It was like Doug Ammons, Coley Erdman. There was a group of them that went through. It's actually, I believe it's Laugh of the Water Nymph that he talks a little bit about that trip that they did to Chiapas, that Doug Ammons talks about that. But Jesse Coombs and I, we were able to just go there and stay there for 2 straight weeks. And we started by going up the river, so we canyoneered up the waterfalls, and then eventually we came back down. And between he and I, we ran every single one of those drops, just the two of us. It was badass. Yeah. At that point, we had already done and pushed a little bit further into a first descent that I had been trying to do in Colombia. And then we also had gone to Brazil. It was my very first trip to Brazil. A paddler by the name of Ryan McPherson, who had been going there for a few years, had invited me to Brazil. We did several first descents there, but on the distal end of that, we came back to Chiapas to make that first descent of the Santo Domingo. And the only reason I mention those other trips is because Jesse had his kayak and his paddle, or he had broke a paddle. He had his kayak denied, so he was borrowing a kayak in each one of those destinations, and then he was using my Prion aluminum paddle. So when he made that first descent of Angel Wings.
Yeah, so talk about that Angel Wings, because I remember hearing like we couldn't really scout it or something, right? And he kind of had to just go. What was kind of the moment of actually running that thing?
Yeah, as I said, we had spent a week there canyoneering all the drops, and just the way that the waterfall faces and the fact that the other wall is like a 300-foot sheer jungle face. Yeah, we could never really get a good look at it. And there were no drones around at that time. We would have just like droned it, but we didn't have the drone. And so eventually Coombsy just decided to send it. Like it was
Aluminum Prion paddle.
with the aluminum Prion paddle with those floaty plastic blades. And that's what we were into. We were just like, yeah, it's going to happen. And Coombs is a special character that probably deserves to be on the echelon of like a Teo. And he was 10 years older than me. Oh. So he was in his early 40s already, and or approaching 40 at that time. And yeah, just sent Angel Wings with me like kind of halfway down the rope, because you have to rappel to get around the drop if you're not going to run it. And so I was like halfway down the rope so I could kind of try to get something, which the footage ended up just being a total, I couldn't see anything because he just gets enveloped in. But then I get the shot of him popping up with the paddle sort of bent at this like 60-degree angle in the middle. He just barely struggles ashore above that next big 80-foot domer and gets on shore, and there's nowhere to go. He's got that 300-foot jungle wall, just a little bench of travertine, and he kicks the paddle and straightens it out, and then makes the hairy ferry across the lip. And that's probably still the highest water it's ever been run at. I would say. I mean, I haven't examined closely all the footage, but I know this last trip with the Sen Boys was well into March, and that's a much better time to go. Yeah. But I should say the next drop, Dome, the Dome Falls, that was the one drop that we did not run on that trip. And then when I brought, that was like the ultimate, that was the final straw between Teo and I, is that I brought him and the crew, and and Josh Bechtel ended up making the first descent of Dome, which I'm super stoked about. Josh is like one of my best homies. And then Teo told me, and then Teo, like, I hadn't come out with that film yet, and Teo told me that like all the footage from the Santo Domingo, even though like they were never going to go to the Santo Domingo in the first place, they were going to go to like the Agua Azul instead, and that it was all his, and that he's going to like, and so that was like the final fallout between Teo and I, and still to this day, I give him like, whenever I see him, I'm like, I know he could beat the shit out of me too, because he's all into jiu-jitsu and stuff, but I still, like, we could fight at any time. It could get physical.
Yeah, the yin yang of
but
people.
That led to, I think, when the footage came out, and I can't remember. I mean, we were still shooting on handy cams. We didn't have like proper photos. I don't know how the National Geographic thing came about, other than I think it was word of mouth in the kayaking community, and there was some folks with connections, but I can't specifically remember, why. I mean, from a personal dirtbag kayaker perspective, I think it was pretty legendary that 3-month run between first descent of the Rio Buey in Colombia, several first descents in Brazil, and then the Santo Domingo thing. I mean, that was one of the sickest kayak trips of my life, but how it like jumped into the mainstream, it's kind of a mystery to me.
So National Geographic just called you up one day or emailed you and said, hey, do you want to be a National Geographic explorer?
Yeah, it was the very first year of the Adventure of the Year, and that's when National Geographic Adventure had its own magazine.
Yeah.
I think that was another thing that happened, and a reason, we were talking about sort of like the kumbaya of these previous couple of generations. Basically, I feel like from No Big Names, from Nurpu, all the way through to almost where we are, like to COVID, somewhere in there, there's this huge, just like, there was a lot of free gear available. The companies were supporting the shit out of the athletes to a huge extent, especially compared to this very small size of our industry. Just like a lot of people were getting support. There was a lot of outside support in terms of like Red Bull, and there was, there was there was like the Eddie Bauer thing. Like, there was just a lot of support for this little tiny niche industry. And there was, National Geographic Adventure of the Year. They put kayaking up on this like adventure pedestal in 2006. I think it was 2006 when the very first award featured Jesse and I, and I just think it made, there was a lot of space for a bunch of us. So I wish I could remember, but they were like, come to Washington D.C. We're gonna give you, a bottle of Jimmy Walker whiskey that I still have in my mom's house.
A custom label.
Yeah, the custom label is like, Ben Stookesberry, keep walking. It was perfect, because then from there on I was just like, started doing a lot of portaging.
Yeah. You probably portaged more miles along rivers than anyone alive, actually.
Yeah, that could be basically my singular claim to fame at this point.
I don't know, man. Like I said, if you're gonna be the most prolific expedition kayaker of all time, you're gonna be the most prolific portager of all time. All right. So then funded, huh?
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say. So then, part of that was that. Then you were an explorer also, or that came later?
I was at where? I'm sorry.
Then did they start funding stuff through National Geographic, funding trips, or was it all still through Eddie Bauer? Or?
Yeah, so that was I want to see. So that film, that was 2006 when we did the mission, and then we were recognized in 2007. And then Eddie Bauer, like that definitely pushed us into a bit more of like a potential mainstream category. Even though we were like still filming on handy cams, like it was just, we got lucky and hooked up with Lucas Gilman and did an article with Thayer Walker. We just had a few things go our way, and then that partnership with Eddie Bauer came about. And that would have been 2009. So really, it was like Eddie Bauer became the first real sponsor. We did end up working with National Geographic on the Greenland crossing, but that was years down the road, and that was actually through the National Geographic Foundation, which is kind of interesting because National Geographic split up into all these different little entities at that time. It was such a boom moment in adventure travel and in the adventure industry that they had National Geographic Adventure, they had National Geographic Travel, they had the Journal, they had the Foundation. And of course now all of that's been broken up into the Murdoch empire. With I think only National Geographic Foundation being its own, independent entity. But like the channel and all that stuff is now a part of Fox. It was really like when Eddie Bauer came to, or what have been, I guess, so that was that National Geographic Adventure of the Year in 2007. That was the birth of the Hotel Charlie series. And we went Hotel Charlie for 5 years, which took us into the very first partnerships with Eddie Bauer. And that started with Jesse Coombs, myself, and then the guy that we started boating with, Darren McCoy. And Darren McCoy obviously is known at this point as just really really interesting character, but an amazing whitewater photographer. And he really had a huge part in getting us that partnership with Eddie Bauer through his imagery, through a trip we did. We were on one of the first trips to the Indus River in Pakistan.
That one, man, when that footage, I was going to say, once you brought up, dang, I remember seeing that and just being like, whoa, like, that is so exposed, just that huge river. You're just getting surfed in hole after hole. It's just that big water. I mean, that was like, when I saw that, I was like, wow. I mean, that's huge. That's scary. That's a lot scarier than these big slides and waterfalls, and that was really the first true descent of that, right? Of actually running the rapids, you think?
So for sure, Olaf Obsommer and his team had come in the year before, and they had done like a Taming the Lion Part 2. But I really think that there was a progression of
rafting,
pretty
something on it.
Yeah, a very rich history on that river. Apparently there was a solo German in 1972. Before that, Buzz Hatch went up to the confluence with a Gilgit and came down in a J-rig, in like a World War II J-rig. So that would have been in like the 60s. And then there's this Dr. Margarita in 72. Of course, there was the original Taming the Lion expedition in the early 90s. And so I can only imagine, and this is a river that's
roadside.
For all intents and purposes, it's roadside. There are portions where the road's 2,000 feet up above you, but you can see it up there. And then it's constantly coming back to the river and going up and down. So it's a roadside river. So I think that, to say we were the first to do anything maybe other than run a few of the bigger drops potentially, definitely, folks have said that I was the first to run one particular drop that's a real nasty, beautiful big hole. So yeah, I think we were just, we had the good luck of exposing that river to a new generation of boaters. And then, of course, really, Annual's really the one who put it into the mainstream by just going back like 1, 2, 3, 4 times and showing it off as like, this new benchmark in big water kayaking.
Yeah, well, for sure. Yeah, Lesser was just talking about how they drove by it on the way to the Brawldew. They did the first descent of the Brawldew and drove along the Indus, and it's like, that looks terrifying down there.
Yeah. Was that the trip? Gosh, I think is that the trip where Mike Jones went into Civ?
The New Zealand crew, yeah, Mick Thompson, Jones, those guys.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is like I look at that old footage of like the Relentless River of Everest. I think that was also 72. Mike Jones and that whole crew. God, why am I forgetting the name of the English guy? Mick. Or there was Mick Hopkinson. Mick Hopkinson. And then there was... anyways, I mean, this was a trip where those guys started from where Edmund Hillary started from. So they trekked for a month to get to the put-in. And, I mean... it just makes me think that it's like you have to work really hard to even put yourself in a position to do that kind of mission these days. And maybe it's not even possible because, they had no satellite phone. There's, you can't go anywhere on this planet and not be, sat connected to the outside world. Which I think is is kind of one of the things that I like about Ecuador so much is like, even if you are sat connected and you have a helicopter hovering above you, it doesn't mean that you can do anything. It doesn't mean that you can actually evacuate from the river.
We're going back to the Santo Domingo, that was that helicopter that saved Gaird's life at not sure if that was the dome drop or what drop, but where Gaird Solis pretty much died, and they brought him back to life right there on the travertine and put him in the helicopter and flew him back. And then he wins the World Championship Extreme race in Austria a year or two later.
Oh, man. Yeah, that was on the Agua Azul at that... it was, it's that drop that has a really easy, like you can raft down the right side of it, but then the other side is that sheer 60-foot drop that lands in like a pool that's like the width of a hot tub that Rafa and EG and Rush and those guys started running. And oh man, what a just amazing, like I don't know if that story is like, I mean, it was obviously showcased in the Chasing Niagara story, and I love Rafa to death, and I have so much respect for Rush, but I was just like, why the fuck did you put that story in someone else's, a film about someone else, like that one story, and then just how you couched it in terms of him going back and winning the world championship at the Ets. I mean, that's the story that needs to be told. We want to know like how it obviously like affected who he was. I mean, Jesus Christ, Israel, who's Rafa's longtime family fixer, the guy who's always there with Rafa on every trip. Like, he said that like Jared didn't come back to life until the helicopter lifted up, and he thought that it was like something happened with that force to get him to start breathing again. I mean, I don't know. I don't even feel right talking about it. That was like, I felt weird watching that in that particular movie. It's a good reminder for all of us. That's for sure. Jesus Christ. That was just.
I'm sure you've had similar lives where you're there in those situations.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, there's been, a couple where we didn't get so miraculously lucky. And there's been several where we luckily didn't get so miraculously close to death in that way. But yeah, unfortunately in 2003, one of like the principal members of our Ashland Mine crew, a big gregarious guy by the name of Jeffy Ellis, who's Joe Ellis's cousin, this amazing family out of Sacramento, California, out of Northern California. They were from the Wairika area. Their family had ties back to land there, and he drowned on Shackleford Creek right outside Fort Jones, Etna, California, in 2003 with myself and that Ashland Mine crew was so big. I forgot to mention all of the kids out of Mount Shasta, the guys, the Knight brothers, Dev, Ryan, and Andrew Gertis, Dev Knight, Ryan Knight, and Andrew Gertis, and it was Dev, myself, Andrew, our other buddy Tristan from Mount Shasta, and Jeffy on the creek, and it was the very last drop, Shackleford Falls. And again, it was, nowhere the size of that drop that we were just talking about on the Agua Azul and Chiapas. This one's just like a 20-footer. But again, it goes into this pool that's like the size of a hot tub, but apparently we didn't know at that time, but it's like 60 or 70 feet deep, that pool. And he just went over, had some problems in the pool, ended up coming out of his boat, and then he was just gone. And yeah, we just could not recover. I mean, even with Tristan making a life or death maneuver and jumping into that pool to try to grab him, he had gone, he'd gone unresponsive. Just really quickly, we saw him resurface, and Tristan just went after him, and we could just not recover. And it was such a tragic loss. He was just, a young man in the prime of his life, had just extricated himself from a career of, an upbringing in American football, and realized like a passion for the river that was just going to take him through the rest of his life. He was more passionate about whitewater and river stuff than anybody. He wasn't on that trip with us to Mexico, but he took all the tapes. We had, dozens and dozens of tapes from that 2-month driving trip to Mexico in 2002. And he went through all of them and sorted out all the footage. And he was the biggest super fan of kayakers there was, and a really good kayaker too. And the one thing that just made it so that it didn't break all of us was his family, and how supportive they were, and how, the furthest thing from their reaction was placing blame, and you can only imagine how tough it was on them to lose their son. But the way they treated the rest of us, I think, was probably the only reason that I was able to continue with, with my passion in a way of, not feeling just incredibly responsible for what happened to him. And, coming to my own conclusion and being allowed to believe that, like, in the best conditions and in the right conditions, we're all just like in charge of ourselves. and that we all take that ultimate risk when we go out on the river, and we all know that, and we all do everything we can to help each other, and like there's something in that creates this just incredible cohesion that makes it so that this individual sport is more like the best possible, like the best kayak crews that I've ever been with, which are many. It's not like I have to pick out just, Boomer and Nuria, or Jesse Coombs and Darren, or, Chris and Eric, or Sarah and Boomer, or Chris and Pedro. Like there are many crews where I'm just like, man, I mean, these are the best experiences in my life with like the people that I ultimately trust more than anyone. So like that feeling that these guys maybe on these Super Bowl winning teams, or these world championship winning teams where they're like a band of brothers, you get to experience that with like these random groups, these much smaller, much more intimate groups of individuals on these rivers, where in most cases nobody else really cares except for the people there. And there's something in that that's just like you always have that.
It does create the tightest bonds for sure when you're relying on each other, almost like Navy SEALs must be, right? It's like one thing I've realized in life, I think I've never been able to beat the yin-yang symbol, so for any benefit, there's an equal and opposite side of that, right? And so if we're getting so much out of the river, it's like, gotta have that equal offset. And yeah, we never get away from it if you're still living the river life. I just, 2 years ago, had pulled one of my best friends out of the river, chasing Russell. He had been running this just the day stretch after work, but it's a pretty gnarly Class 5 on the Crystal there by Carbondale, Colorado, and was out with Stan. And just swam and just disappeared. And he was just gone. And so the next day we got a big crew of us and all went down there and eventually found him, had to get a whole rig up ropes and a raft and everything and be probing. And yeah, he had just gotten married 2 weeks before. And yeah, just one of those salt of the earth guys,
Oh man. Yeah, I definitely remember hearing about that at Meat Grinder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did some early runs up there, and like the like the Zanskar and Chebdar and those things. I think Russell Kelly did the first ascent of the Chebdar, but
oh really?
Solo on 9/11 when 9/11 everybody was on it.
Oh no way!
And he got to the takeout, no plan, no shuttle, just Russell Kelly thing, right? Just grab some stuff at the roadside stand and put on, and ends up taking out at this village, and it's like, turbaned, and Pakistan, and sitting there in this little family's house watching 9/11. So he watched like the towers coming down and everything on the news, like in this rural Pakistani village.
Wow. Holy shit. Yeah, we ran into him and Damien in 2003 in southern Chile. That was definitely a memorable encounter out of nowhere. These two guys just
oh yeah, classic.
Staying under this little roof.
Russell was level. He was turned up to 11 at all times.
He was chill. He was chill that day. It was just Damon and I that went out and got on this river. Damon barefoot.
Yeah. And now they both passed. Yeah. Russell right after we went and did the Boschhaus whole Book of Legends trip, and which were the first English signatures. One kayaker had gone with rafters, but other than that, it was all Russian writing in that Book of Legends when we did it. There was only one kayaker
Yeah.
done it, and I think the fastest had been like 3 weeks or something, or 2 weeks. Eugene had that wonderful book on it, Brothers on the Boschkas, but
Yeah.
that thing was gnarly. And so then it takes us from the takeout of that, it was 8 days till we got back to Bozeman. It was like a Jeep out on this road. And those villages in Siberia are gnarly, It's not like Mongolia or Kyrgyzstan. It's the same people, right? The Mongolians, but they've just been decimated there, It would be people surrounding the van. A guy had to shoot a gun at one point in this little village just to get people away from our van and shit. But anyway, this huge 8 days to get back, and then we get back like at 2, and he's like, "I'm taking off." And we're like, "Dude, don't take off, man. We're like worked, This wait." And he took off and ends up crashing his car and dying. But I'd saved his
Jesus.
life on that trip. It was actually this other creek we were doing, and it was one of the vodka nights. So much vodka there, and we just got super drunk. And he and Pruzan had been talking about Pruzan had lost his water bottle on the first descent of the is that one in Chile? Not the Bacher, but that other one down there. That's
The Pasqua.
yeah, Pasqua. And so Russell and Damon thought they were the first descent, and like, all right. And then they found Pruzan's water bottle that he had lost on a portage. But anyway, they made that connection right there at the campfire, and Russell's just on one, drinking. And we were camped right at this 100-foot just gorge, it was only maybe 50 feet wide, but 100 feet deep. And it's a class 5 rapid right in it. And my boy's like, "I gotta go take a piss," and just walking, and right before he walks right off it in the dark, it's grab him and pull him back. I'm like, "Dude."
Oh, man.
Get a lot of classic characters in Whitewater.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, it's a big pitfall in the community for sure. The drink. Definitely had some close encounters with the bad end of the bottle.
Well, it kind of goes, right? I think it has to do with you're living a life that's so intense, right? And so full on, and you don't drink because you got to perform, right? And so then you don't have that as much, right? And then you just get into that point in life, right, where you've been living this party for so long that by mid-30s, right, that kind of age is just really typical for people, to just, there's no more party, but you're still drinking, right?
Yeah.
No, I went about 7 years ago. I went California sober, and one of the best decisions I ever made.
What's California sober?
Just do everything except drinking.
Oh, gotcha. I like that.
Yeah. Well, I just took 3 months off once, and right when I hit 40, and did no change in exercise. Didn't change my life at all. I went from basically a dad bod to a 6-pack. I'm like, wait a second. This is if I'm going to maximize this next 20 years, I only got 20 years of sessions left, right? That's only so many skiing, kayaking, surfing sessions. I don't want to miss any, and just kind of committed to it then, and worked out great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did the Bearman come about? That was quite the expedition to that Grand Canyon of the Pacific.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a crazy one, and that was right at the pinnacle of what we were doing with Pedro Oliva in Brazil, and we had partnered with him sometime after that first trip to Brazil. I had met him on the Ottawa River during the World Championships there. I was just there being a hanger-oner for the Jacksons, and met up with this Pedro Oliva, and then one thing led to another. He ran a Monster Falls a month before Tyler ran Palouse. He ran that 120, 130 foot falls. Did the front flip, face plant, and somehow somehow came out just totally good to go. It's still sort of unknown whether or not he actually came out of his boat because there's no one back behind the falls to see what happened. But he, from what we saw, all of a sudden he comes walking out from back behind the falls like a minute later, and he's not even missing like a hip pad or his water bottle that he had in the boat.
And so for a minute
he
was gone.
He was for a full minute, or I can't remember. We had it in the film where we were like timing it, and it's like a full minute of him just gone, and we're running around. It's like Pedro's fucking dead. He's dead. He just did a head plant off of a really wide 130 foot tall waterfall, and sure as shit, he comes walking out behind the falls. It's like, I saw a snake. There's a boa constrictor back there. No, I stayed in my boat, but my paddle evaporated. So he took that and like launched himself into the national limelight. Went on the big Sunday sports show or the big Sunday variety program in Brazil. Oh, there we go. And he went on the Sunday variety program, the biggest, most watched program in Brazil, and turned that into a whole 5 years worth of expedition kayaking shows that were funded by Brazil, that went from 2011 right up until the Brazilian economy started to deteriorate with the World Cup and with the Olympics. Like after that, didn't seem to be any additional funding left in Brazil. But those 5 years really ended up culminating in two things. One of which was the ice waterfall descents, the first ice waterfall descents. I had to remind Annual of that this year. I was like, hey, bro, like, I know, like, we like your capture was amazing and you hit some sick ass water levels, but come on, man. Like, he's like, oh yeah, man, like Prada, they needed me to say that. And I was like, all right, well, fuck. And then
the media, you can't never get it right. But I love seeing him do that Prada commercial. I love seeing people get paid. I'm like, fuck yeah, pay the man, Prada.
Dude, and he's legit, obviously. There's nothing but like, this guy came out of like nowhere in Spain to be like the world's finest kayaker, one of them. But the other thing, in addition to the ice waterfalls, like, I mean, Brazil paid for us to go on like a $500,000 expedition ultimately to go do these ice waterfalls. Like, how does that happen? And then they also got us over to another really expensive destination, which just due to our geographic location was getting us over to this island off the coast of Papua New Guinea, New Britain Island. And, Trip and Andy Mazer with their National Geographic, it was like a National Geographic youth grant or something. They had gotten over there, and that's how it popped onto my radar, was that those guys had gone over there, boated a river that flowed out of a cave on New Britain, showcased this just otherworldly spot. And so for the Brazil TV show, we're like, well, shit, we've got funding. Let's go to New Britain. Like, we know there's some sick rivers there. We can go check out the river that Andy and Trip checked out. And then there's got to be other rivers on the island. Let's go check out some of those, let's go check it out. So we went over there on the Brazilian TV show dime and went to the river. First went to the river that Trip and Andy had gone to, and show up in the community. We're like, okay, yeah, let's do this. And then the locals were just like super pissed off. Apparently they had shown up and the locals wanted payment, and those guys had escaped the situation. You gotta like understand. I mean, it was probably, I don't know that they had a local liaison with us, and luckily we did. And so like, anyways, they showed up and they just escaped. Like they did exactly what we had done, years before in Chiapas. And when the guys showed up with their machetes and chewing the beetle nut with all the red mouths and super agitated and demanding money, they had just taken off. So then when we come back a year or two later, we're in big trouble because the white guys are back, and now they're going to get their money. And so we sat there for like 2 or 3 straight days with our local. Luckily, our local, speaking their language and negotiating, and we ended up paying them off with our Brazil money. But they're like, okay, but if you go downstream, you're gonna have to do the exact same thing with the next village and the next village. Those guys are like, they just made it's kind of a, it's a political disaster right now for white guys in kayaks. And so we ended up doing a few drops on that river, and then we had the helicopter come pick us back up, take us to the other side of the island. And we ended up doing the first descent of this thing called the ISO Gorge. And I think this was the main reason that we had gone to PNG, was the original National Geographic that showcased New Britain was about a caving expedition. And the cavers had taken photos of waterfalls that were underground, and they were on this ISO river. And so we're like, well, we're just going to drop into the ISO river. We're going to go find the underground waterfalls, and it'll be awesome. And actually, it wasn't a helicopter; it was a fixed wing. So we go in the fixed wing, and the fixed wing's flying us over at whatever. I don't know how fast they go, but it's not super fast, but it's still like 120 miles an hour. So we're flying over the ISO Gorge at 120 miles an hour, and it's like, I just remember being like, "Oh, I can't see the river, but oh, there it is again," and then I can't see the river, and then, oh, it looks great. So we drop into the ISO Gorge, Pedro, Chris, and I, and we're just fucked. Like, the first scout is this vertical walled canyon, and we get up on top of the canyon. There's this earthquake, and it's just the scariest thing of our lives. It starts raining. We're having to camp inside the canyon in the riverbed. Like, we just got so lucky to survive that trip. Luckily, there was only like 4 plus, a little bit of 5- down inside the gorges, but we were just totally fucked and completely exposed to any flash flood. And sure as shit, we spent 8 days, most of which we were just like trying to scout unsuccessfully. And we just had to go into these gorges. And sure as shit, when we come out on the 8th day and we're camped finally where the river's opened up on this beach, the river flash floods, and we would have been killed. And so we just thought that was just fucking awesome. So when we're flying out of the ISO back to the main airport, we fly over this thing that just looks like the Grand Canyon, except surrounded by all the jungle. But it's literally a mile deep of all these cliffs, and we can see the river pretty well at the bottom. But again, we're just on a direct flight back, and we're just like, oh my God, like, that's the thing. I mean, it's the Grand Canyon of the Pacific. We see some waterfalls down there. We see this turquoise colored water, and it just looks perfect. And so I had been in touch with a production company out of Squamish. Why am I forgetting his name? 49 megawatts. But we had just done our very first. I had just done like my first collaboration with Red Bull Adventure, and that was a time when the Red Bull entities were separate. You had the Red Bull TV channel, and I think it's still that way. But but there were a lot of the Red Bull Adventure had a lot of leeway. And so it wasn't all about just the Red Bull athletes. Like they were just looking for really sick expeditions. And I had collaborated with them via TGR on a trip that I had done in the Sierra Madre in Durango, Mexico. And we had turned that expedition into I think what was called like Adventure of the Year, Adventures of the Millennia, or some Red Bull show. And so we had been in touch with them about doing more and doing something that was like that they would help actually produce, and that they would put money into being able to shoot and put together the professional production team. And that's really how it all came about, was putting a professional production team together with a group of kayakers. And so we were able to add Benny Marr to our team, we had just done our very first trip with him, or I had done my very first trip with him in the Torngat of Labrador, Canada, in eastern Canada. And so he joined us. And so at that point we had a pretty awesome like 4-man team of Pedro Oliva, Chris Korbulik, and Benny Marr to go into this trip. And it was, so the production company was Real Water Films, and it was an old kayaking homie, or someone that I had always been aware of, who was behind, like, his very first film was 49 megawatts, about how the hydroelectrics had gone into southern BC and had dammed the ash slough. And he made this really sick film about, how they put this micro hydro on the ash slough to push it through underneath the pretty strict Canadian regulation. And so Brian Smith was, he's class 5 kayaker and had launched his career into adventure filmmaking, a really high-end filmmaker. And he and Dave Pearson had formed this production team. And it's definitely worth mentioning those guys, and because they brought along one other homie named Matt Mataloni, who was not a kayaker at all, but an extremely high-end climber. And at the beginning of that trip, after we finally took a proper helicopter flight over the river and saw that it was just this labyrinth of vertical walled gorges, he helped us put together like an ad hoc kit of hook and bolt, and we ended up buying an impact battery-powered impact driver to be able to bolt our way through this canyon. And yeah, it was, I don't know. I guess I'm just, I was just really, really attracted to the aesthetics of this river. I mean, it was like nothing that I'd ever seen before. And so I was just 100% in from the word go. And I don't know that was like the best way to approach that river, but we had a shit ton of help from Brian and Dave and Matt Mataloni, and those guys really knew what they were doing. And we had this insane Kiwi helicopter pilot. And they had actually brought a B3 up from New Zealand in order to be able to properly shoot this river trip. So we had like the sickest helicopter pilot ever. We had these guys that knew what to do with ropes, that had our back 100%. And those guys had a pretty savage budget. I mean, you can imagine how much it cost to bring the B3 up from New Zealand, and then to have, I don't know how much helicopter time was. Like, it was kind of a weird partnership with Red Bull in that way, because they mandated that we pay for all of what we needed to do as kayakers. It was, I don't know, in some ways it's kind of cool, because you're like, you could never say, oh, like we got ourselves into trouble because, or like we did it because it was our trip. We funded the trip. It was, a lot of Eddie Bauer money to make our side. Or Eddie Bauer paid for like 10 hours of helicopter time on our side that it took us to scout the river, to get into the river. We had to fly across the island in order to stage. Like, it was still a significant amount of helicopter time. But then I can only imagine how much helicopter time those guys had in order to film the thing and basically be there in the event that we had to press the oh shit button. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely the first time and the first major collaboration that we had with an actual production team. That definitely made it possible because, yeah, in spots we bolted our way through that canyon, used the impact driver, used these these sketchy, not sketchy the expanding bolts were good, but the webbing hangers that we melted little holes through, those were sketchy for sure. And yeah, it was pretty good. But again, it was like the day after we got through the river flash flooded. So I don't know. I mean, it was sick. But these trips, like, I think we actually got lucky. We ran like a 50, 60-foot waterfall on that trip. So it had that little piece of eye candy that sort of validated it with the Class 5 kayakers. But many of the trips that I've done, like, they're sick and they're super fucking risky. And the portaging is crazy. And we don't have a helicopter flying overhead. And it's like just this last one that I did with Willie Henkel, like, it's just the two of us. And so, like, it's hard to communicate to the outside world just like what that was, other than say, go try it again if you if you want to know how it was. But the beauty of that Berryman trip, I think, was really in that collaboration with Brian Smith and Dave Pearson and Matt Mataloni and Red Bull, really, to have the money and to have them be able to really just be able to showcase that place. Yeah, we ran a little 50-foot waterfall, but really what they did so magically, I think, in my opinion, was be able to, like, expand the view and really, like, put the aesthetics of that place on display, which is really what had, like, inspired me and inspired Chris and inspired Benny and inspired Pedro to take that risk, was just like this otherworldly place with these friggin', bats with 8-foot wingspans flying around, and the red walls like the Grand Canyon, and the turquoise little river at the bottom. And so that was badass. And yeah, it was definitely, I think that the only shortcoming of that film was that he didn't, like, make themselves characters in the film, because they were for sure, like, absolutely 100% a part of why we were able to pull that off. Was like, we just went to a cinder block wall and Matt Mataloni taught us how to hook and bolt. Like, none of us had ever done any of that shit. And so but I don't know how many climbers are going to feel comfortable with, like, showing a bunch of shitty kayakers that have never done any proper climbing in their lives how to hook and bolt before, like, this life or death mission. Like, I thought that was probably pretty.
You didn't care. Yeah, that was so visually stunning, that river, for sure. And how'd you start hooking up with Boomer? He's such a classic guy, such a good dude. You did the Greenland 5000 kite to kayak. Absolute craziness.
Yeah. Boomer's the man. Like, it's so funny in our community how, especially these days, you can like kind of get to know someone that you've never met before. I think that happened in a lot of ways with Boomer and I. Is like we were aware of each other. Like this was probably when we were like getting to know each other virtually. It was before really social media had become so prevalent, but through like Rush's films and all of his crazy shit that he was doing in Rush's films, and then through my like beater films, like we just got to know each other. And we had met a few times, and then just after he had met Sarah, and he was making the transition up to the Arctic, and just after he and John Turk had made that insane circumnavigation of Ellesmere, I was like, man, I want to do, I want to get into something like that. And he had just, I think it was just after that circumnavigation of Ellesmere, which kind of makes sense now that I think about it, is he had a knee surgery. I mean, that must have just been awful, walking for 120 straight days over shitty, jagged ice. Anyways, he had just had a knee surgery, but he organized the front end and the permissions for us to go up into the Labrador Peninsula and try to pull off that Notchvock. And so that was our first mission together. And on that trip, he was hobbled, so he couldn't go into the Notchvock with Pedro and Chris and Benny and I. But I was just like, yeah, I mean, Boomer was obviously a huge reason why we pulled off that trip. And then on that trip, he's like, you know, what would be an amazing way, because on that trip we used a 400-mile long sort of canoe route to get up to the Torngat. And he's like, but you know what a sick way to get to a river would be is to kite ski there. And I was like, oh my God, I've never kite skied before, but that sounds interesting. And so I think that's where that idea came to fruition. It was because he had met Sarah, and Sarah had grown up as this epic kite skier, and he had heard about her trips to Greenland. And so we just started talking about that. and sure enough, in I guess what would have been the spring of 2016, they invited me to come visit their home up in Baffin Island, Sarah in his home, and learn how to kite ski. And that's where that trip started, was March in Baffin Island, 40 below zero, learning to kite ski with Sarah and Boomer.
And how many miles did you kite ski over just till you got to the river?
600. Well, I think it was like 525 to 550 with 50 to 75 miles of walking on, or 20 to 25 to 35 miles of walking on either side.
And how many days that take all through?
And that was, it was 42 all told with the river. So when we got picked up on the other side, drop off to pick up. And then I think we were up on the ice cap for 31 of those days. Yeah, so it was definitely more of a kite skiing trip than it was a kayaking trip, but it felt like it made sense. We were going to the river, and I think that's when for sure that's when my idea and my expectations of doing a long approach to a river, like whether or not it's going to be worthwhile or blah 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 blah, all that just gets thrown out the window. It's just like, if you're going to the river, it's all good. It doesn't matter how much further you travel than you are traveling down the river. That's all bullshit, because if you get one or two, or in that case 3 sick drops, it's totally worth it.
And that one drop that Boomer ran with just the ice all over that huge falls, it's still one of the gnarliest things I've seen. It was just like, holy shit. Like, man, you just kited all that way. It's freezing cold, and here's just this insane huge drop.
Man, it was crazy too because the day before was for sure, other than like the first or second day that we started the trek when we were like walking in our underwear. I mean, for well over a month, it was the nicest day that we had seen. It was like one of the first days above freezing. So beautiful. And you could definitely see, I mean, that was the day when we were just like walking along the side and sun was out. I could see the line for sure. It was so there. And you might have to fact check me on this, but I think Boomer was super skeptical. And he was like, he was into it. We were walking around all day long, but he was just like, And then, when we had the snowstorm that night, we wake up in the morning and everything's covered in, a few inches of snow with a thin layer of ice underneath from that warm day. That's when he like decided that he was really into it. And I was just like, what the fuck, dude? I was, but then it's also when I realized how useful crampons are. Like if on wet rock, slippery rock, definitely rock covered in ice, crampons are the shit. And it was actually much less sketchy hiking around that next day, albeit it was, it was like 25 degrees, snowing. And Boomer's all inspired to wake up at 5:30 in the morning to go bag this drop because we only had like 5 days left to get to the ocean. And it's classic Boomer. Made no sense to me.
Similar to that crazy one he ran on the tongue, that big old sliding thing. We actually had heard about that from like local kids. We've been exploring all around in those mountains way back in the day. And kids like, oh, there's this waterfall in there, and we were trying to find that, but it was, it's just such a sieved up river. It was like, oh, we can paddle about 100 yards and then we need to get out, and we never even put on.
There was that river actually had some really sick runnable sections, and there was a beautiful section that led all the way up to us somewhere in there where we had that photo of Boomer belaying Nori as she like jumped across that boulder. Like that was all good and runnable, and it led up to the lip of that like monster drop. 80, I don't know. I mean, with the 20-foot lead-in, it was probably over 100 feet tall. It doesn't look good. Like most of the falls is like reflecting or like bouncing off the slide and into this inescapable cave. But yeah, Nuri and Boomer were pretty into it, eating cheese and crackers, scouting it. I was like, I'm gonna go over to the other side, Portage. I'll be happy to be safety.
Yeah.
But yeah, Boomer had a sick line. I mean, Boomer's line was perfect. Nuria hit pretty hard. She got bounced and hit hard. They both nailed it. I mean, you just didn't want to go in that huge cave, and they both nailed it.
That was kind of random. She ended up on that trip, huh? How did you guys hook up with her?
Yeah, so I guess that was the first collaboration with her, more or less. I had met her at the North Fork Championships. And I'd never gone to the North Fork Championships, but it was something that my partner Cheyenne was really into. So when I met Cheyenne, I started going to the North Fork Championships and got exposed to that whole scene. And met Noria there. But now that I think about it, I had just run into her on the river in California for the very first time, just prior to that, on Fantasy Falls, and it was I was with a different group of guys, and all of a sudden our two groups collided, and we were all at the biggest drop in Fantasy Falls at the Untouchables together, and there was like 6 of us that ran the Untouchables. So I got to run the Untouchables with Doria, and I was like, whoa, holy shit. I guess I had, and then we were like, oh, we have mutual friends in Argentina. So then we did a trip to Argentina together, where I had done my very first, what I consider to be multi-day river expedition on a river, on the first descent of this river called the Tunuyan. And so I had gone back to Argentina to do another first or it was actually a second or third descent of a sister river called the Diamante. And then that next year, when I saw her at the North Fork, I was like, hey, let's go do the tongue. This is perfect. Like, you're probably the besides Boomer, you're the perfect person to do that particular river. You need it definitely seems like you need a special mentality, either a masochistic urge to carry your kayak over boulders, or a masochistic urge to do some sketchy kayaking through civvy stuff. But the thing about the tongue, and I think it kind of goes back to that mentality that we had in the Berryman, is just like, it's properly beautiful. I mean, when you stand up above, there's several overlooks that you can get from the highway right there out of Dayton. That place is spectacular.
It's
spectacular
too, with all the Native American history all around it.
Yeah, it definitely has an energy that makes you want to go in there and explore, and it definitely inspired.
Hasn't even been 100 years since they were living in, the Crow and living right there, like still in teepees, still had to 1920, 1890, still 100 years ago.
I mean, it must be what, like 30 miles from Wounded Knee, right?
Mm-hmm. Right there.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one thing that that maybe I'm just very starting, just at the beginning stages of coming to terms with, is like we are kind of going in there with our dry suits and our plastic kayaks, and we're kind of like aliens in these places, and we're utilizing these pretty awesome technological advances. Like, just the dry suit allows you to do so much, allows you to survive in these rivers and in these cold places, and getting wet, covered in ice, or just being comfortable enough to think that it's a good idea to go over a 50-foot waterfall in the middle of some of these canyons. But then there's this other side of it. You're like, is it the aesthetics? Is it, what is it? And I think you kind of alluded to it there. I mean, these are spiritual places where just so recently these ancestral cultures were thriving, and that had their deities and their families and their generations of people that called these places like their Shangri-La, their homes. And so I don't know, I guess it's really more of just trying to connect river advocacy to a place of more of just let's maintain places for us to recreate, as opposed to there's something more, there's something obviously much more there, much more important than just having some sick whitewater venues to practice our sport. These places are necessary, hopefully, to humanity, beyond just beyond just recreation. Like there's a spirituality there. It's certainly like, biologic diversity that seems important too. But even like further than that, like a place for all of us to like, have dreams and be inspired and to feel that sense of inspiration, that seems like it can supersede like some of these other things that have ruled our culture, like, materialism and, social status and all that shit, how much money and, it's like, whoa, being inspired to like go and take a journey into some of these places. For sure we go into them in a much different way with the plastic kayak and, the Teflon dry suits. But, I think that even with that, even with those, those different tools that we've gone in there with, there's some like, intrinsic or inherent like learning that's taken place in terms of, I grew up in the suburbs, so just going and, really having a focus on being in the natural world or being able to, go into the mountains in that way. Yeah, wasn't really on my radar growing up.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, wherever you go, right, you're kind of into this other culture aspect of it. Like you were in Chiapas or wherever you go. I remember, when I was little, like traveling in Nepal or wherever, India, it's like, I felt so weird taking pictures, like this is like takes me out of the, so I kind of kick myself now, but I didn't take any pictures in these places, but it just felt like I wasn't then part of what's happening. You go to those places like India, right? You're never part of what's happening there. Like you're no matter what you do, you're not part of what's going on in the scene in India, wherever you are. But yeah, it's always a big.
It definitely makes it like so much. I mean, I think that's why it's a big reason why I just continue to go back to Latin America at this point, and specifically to Ecuador, is like when you can communicate, it's just, life is so good, and you can be a part of what's happening, and you are absolute, and people, they're so curious to know and to communicate. And when you're in India and you're in a small village and nobody speaks English and your Hindi is nothing or a few words, it's a totally different ball game.
Not to mention there's 25 kids standing 2 feet from you staring at you the whole time you're in that Indian village.
Yeah. I mean, the cool thing is these days is like these kayaking communities are popping up everywhere. And like there's big kayaking communities in India, like they're having these events, and then in Nepal. Those were some of my favorite trips. Was one expedition that I did with a Nepali named Lamakundan Tamang, where we took on a few first descents up in Arunachal Pradesh. And then another one that I did years later with Surgeon Tamang, not related at all, sick-ass kayaker. He ended up doing a descent of the Karnali, I believe, with Annual and Todd and those boys. But we went down and boated a big chunk of the Dude Cozy from the park boundary down. And just having that partnership, being able to boat with a local that all of a sudden, you want to go up and have tea with someone up in a little farmhouse, and those lines of communication are wide open in a way that, I can't even open up lines of communication with some rural, Mexican farmer, but he's a Nepali from their specific area. And, those have definitely been some of the best experiences is just being able to, not just go to these rivers with my American buddies, but to be able to partner with, specifically those kayakers, be able to partner with, Diego Robles in Ecuador, be able to partner with the Argentinian paddlers running some of their rivers, the Chilean paddlers, in each one of these six kayaking destinations these days, with very few exceptions, there's sick ass paddlers to go boat with, and inevitably those guys definitely benefit from us coming there and wanting to partner with them, and taking advantage of their capacity to be these sick guides, and then them being able to capitalize on the American dollars that we're bringing to travel. Really good collaborations, and I think that would be. It's obviously happening more and more.
And a lot of it comes maybe from like those first expeditions in the 80s and 90s and leaving the kayaks behind. I've seen that play out in places like Iceland and stuff. So cool that it's really come to fruition, the whole young generations. Like happened on the Food of the Foo, right, a couple decades before other places, but even the obscure ones are getting there now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah. In a place like Ecuador, they just need more gear. They need more of us to come. And it's such a shitty deal because they can't import the stuff, or when they do import it, it lands here and lands there and it's 2 times the price. There's not enough used gear, and there's like this competition that gets created for the used gear that's available, and so it diminishes this competition for gear, diminishes the capacity for the locals to collaborate and unify to protect their own rivers. So it's good, but it's like, man, there's some challenges with it as well, but it's awesome too. I mean, yeah, the kayaking community in Ecuador is so sick. So many good boaters.
That Tana crew is awesome, really fun. Yeah, your point on the gear earlier was like the dry suits, the good kayaks, I feel like, I guess this is probably a pretty privileged white guy view, but I feel like we hit the perfect time to be humans. Like, I feel like this is the ultimate time to be a human in what I consider planet Earth heaven. Like, I think that our time here is our time in heaven. Like these mountains, these rivers, these oceans, you can't be more heavenly than this. Although you also can't beat the yin-yang, right? It's equal good and bad on this planet. But, to have we have all these toys, the skis that are fat powder skis we got just in time, These kayak designs we got just in time, All these things our generation got it just in time, but then yet the earth is still relatively unspoiled, right? Look at all the amazing places you've been that are just so much wilderness, so much unspoiledness, this planet's still pretty virgin, relative to what it could end up. And it just feels like, gosh, I'm so thankful I hit this time period to be a human on Earth.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't argue with that. It definitely feels like a bit of a privileged white guy point of view. We've both been in villages where it's not an option for these kids. But then again, I've been in those villages, and I've seen the way that the people live off the land, and I've been invited into their homes and see the way their families function. And then I've been to other places where the families are totally separated. Places here in our own cities, and the connection isn't like that. And you put grandma and grandpa in the old folks' home, and so yeah. But yeah, for the technology that exists and the wilderness that still exists, like I can't argue with that.
The airplanes to get anywhere you want easily.
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing. Yeah, while we're chasing these places, it seems like we're definitely a part of the degradation for sure. I mean, to get to New Britain and to get to Ecuador on the quick, and yeah, we're helping to exacerbate the whole thing. Yeah, I mean it's yeah, it's a bit of a question. Is that one side of it is like humanity is doing all of this, and like we're destroying the earth, and I think that regardless we are doing that, but whether or not we have a choice in the matter, I think that's the big question. Is like, can any one of us, like, or any number of us, even stand up and like change the course of where this whole thing is going? Are we just inevitably another, a natural extinction event, just like we've had in the past? Whether it was a huge volcanic eruption or a supernova ripping off our ozone layer, or whatever else. So. But I mean, the fucked up thing is like these 3 years, and it's only been 3 years since I've been boating in Ecuador. I took a bus through Ecuador back in 2003 after my first mission in Colombia. I took a bus from Colombia to Chile and just went through Ecuador. My buddy Shannon Linane that had taken me to Colombia, and we kind of parted ways. We had like just spent 2 months together. We'd like come to the end of our partnership. He got off in Ecuador and I continued on down to Chile. And really at that time I was like, oh, it's, Ecuador, super tiny country. Pretty well, it was already at that time pretty well known, like in terms of whitewater, like, and anything that I'd ever seen from there was always just like kind of manky boulder gardens and stuff. So I wasn't really too interested, which I definitely kick myself now because it is a whitewater Shangri-La. But just in these last 3 or 4 years since I went there for the first time, the amount of just destruction and just environmental violation and just awful mining shit that's happened there in the last 3 years is insane. I've never seen anything like it. My 25 years of kayaking, and still it's still a Shangri-La, and there's still like Tena. The province of Napo still is like 75% national park. But that 25% that was just these rural communities and villages, and now is just like becoming strip mine after strip mine after strip mine with a growing city in the middle. And like, it's like, fuck. And if I would have got off the bus in 2003, the Misawai that's below Tena, people were still running through that and like, without concerns of water pollution. So yeah, it's like, it's this double, just like you said, it's the yin and the yang. It's like the one side of it is like the best possible time to be alive. You can go to the other side of the world cheaply, still get your kayak on the plane, which is still mind-boggling. How you can show up at the airport with this massive piece of luggage, get it on the plane. If you take the right airline too, it might not even cost you anything, and get off and like. And then the other side of it is it's just all disappearing right in front of our eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The Tena and that whole Ecuador, it's got to be the most highest density of class 4 more accessible rivers in the world, right? Of just like all of them, with everything else as well. But there's just so many to just go do all around there.
Yeah. I think it's the highest density of class 5 plus super NAR expeditions of anywhere on Earth.
Probably
You want
that
to take
too.
on the hardest river you've ever tried in your life? You could try a first descent. You could try a river that's already been done. But yeah, there's some really accessible class 4 as well. Kind of. It's like Ecuadorian class 4, which is kind of sandbagged unless you get the exact perfect water level. Otherwise, it's really more like, low grade class 5 to like super hyphy 5 plus big water shit. But but there is some class 4. There is some class 4. But I think mostly it's sandbag class 4.
Yeah, Hondachi. That thing's a classic of all the world. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I mean in the
go ahead.
yeah. Whenever you say any single one of those rivers, you're just like, oh man, that asshole Robert Friedland that was notorious back in the day for selling LSD at Grateful Dead concerts, who now runs one of the biggest mining operations in the world, is going to just completely destroy the whole Hondachi Hoyin in extracting 2 million barrels of oil shale and silica to line the oil pipelines. Yes.
Well, the Ecuadorian president, that was really interesting a few years ago when he was like, all right, well, if you want us to leave it in the ground, pay us to leave it in the ground, right? You can't just tell us leave it in the ground and you're slated to be poor when the rest of the world has all gone out of poverty, right? I mean, just in the last 20 years has been the greatest human advance out of poverty in ever, right? I mean, it went from, I think it was something like 65% of people were in poverty around the world just 20 years ago, and now it's like 10, 15 or something, right? Because all of India, all of China, I saw it in China real time, go from mud hut village to skyscrapers all around, and people go from poor to middle class over that period.
Yeah, it's hard to know if going from like an agrarian small village life with all of your food coming locally and bathing in the pristine river, if it's really an upgrade to like be able to go to this supermarket and buy some clothes and have to deal with cancer and all the other pitfalls of modern day life, the depression and all that shit. I don't know. And, in the case of Ecuador, all this resource extraction is, you're still driving on a road that's like a main road, a main thoroughfare that's just totally destroyed. Like all that money is just evaporating into corruption and backdoor payments. And so, man, I mean, God, they have everything, of course, but there's also, and then on our side of things, there's also like a big disconnect that takes place when, we're able to buy our bananas for whatever, 50 to $1 a pound. And, yeah, they're obviously subsidizing that for us. But yeah, I mean, it's, especially just down in Chiapas right now, it's like, God, such beautiful communities and such beautiful rivers. But you're exactly right. It's like, if the minimum wage in northern Mexico or think specifically northern Mexico, because some of those economies are much better off than some of the ones further south, where it's like 200 pesos a day, $10 a day for like farm work. Whereas, up here, it's what, $8 to $14 an hour, depending on what state you're in. I mean, that's a huge difference, and it doesn't make any sense. Like, especially for Mexico, they've got everything. They've got the concrete, fisheries. They've got petroleum. They've got the mining bullshit. They've got, all the where all the avocados, like all the limes, like, and then they make $10 a day. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
But the entire post-World War II economy, right? We've shaped it to serve the U.S., right? So we've set it up that way, and we've thrived. I mean, I can't. It's so funny for me to hear politicians and things talking about the U.S. we're doing terrible. It's like, how could we do any better? You're like, what other country is doing better than us?
Right. Who else are we going to take advantage of? And then I guess on the other side of the coin, you got to say that, like, that is the lovely thing about going down to Chihuahua is, like, all of a sudden you can go and eat out and you can get a nice big plate of tacos for $5. You can go there as a dirtbag kayaker. You could work seasonally and launch an expedition kayaking career off some seasonal construction work. So it's definitely been a huge part of my kayaking career, is being able to take advantage of that system. That's for sure.
Yeah, your question of whether it's better for people to stay villagers with this idyllic life or move into the modern era, it's kind of the yin yang too, right? One's not better than the other. And to me, yin yang is not some spiritual thing. I'm not even sure what it means in the Buddhist religion or anything, but it's just physics to me. Like, you can't create or lose anything, right? Energy or matter. It's like, so you're always just shifting. There's one's not better than another, right? All these decisions you make in your life, like, one wasn't like, this was fundamentally better. It's just trade-offs.
Yeah.
How do you think you've kind of kept the fire for it all? Like, we've all seen people fade out of it. Lindgren talked about, the moment Muncie walked away from kayaking in the middle of one of the expeditions, just kind of lost it, right? And I've seen friends, I saw Selznick, a similar thing on this Kyrgyzstan trip where, he had always been, right, one of the premier kayakers in the whole world, just always another level. And then kind of just, right, that late 20s, early 30s, you just kind of start to, you've been so gnarly for so long, right? 10, 15 years of running the gnarliest stuff in the world. And how do you think, have you had to kind of reinvent yourself on it a couple times and, like, kind of do a trip where you refound the love? Or how have you kind of kept that fire and, like, going after Class 5?
Yeah, I think part of it is, like, maybe I'm just kind of a one-trick pony in that way. Is like, I just haven't found anything else that's really taken me away from it. And I grew up skiing, but in the world that we live in, it seems like it's the boat and the melting water is the better way to. It's always been, like, a better thing to focus on, and a more ubiquitous thing, and a better way to just have carte blanche. And anywhere on Earth, there's always flowing water. I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. I just, for lack of a better idea, I think I've always been really into the group mentality, or, like, the team element of the kayaking. So, certainly I've got an ego in terms of, like, the first descents and being able to pull off hard rivers. But it's definitely been because of the crews that I've been with. You know, whether it was like the you know, the actual being on the sharp end, like putting Noria or Boomer or Benny Marr or Chris Korbulik on the sharp end of the trip of the mission, you know, being able to lead down those rivers, or like having someone like Pedro Oliva who was able to generate the funding, you know. Also, he would run the really huge drops, but like being on the boat scouting end and actually being able to, like, you know, to boat scout those rivers and be able to open up the way forward and downstream. That wasn't really his particular part of it, but definitely like the funding and the inspiration and the planning was a huge thing that he did. And I think that I've just been really lucky to go from like that original crew of Eric Seymour and Chris and Brent Bunton and those guys, and be able to transition to Jesse Coombs and Darren McCoy, and then be able to partner with Chris, and us being able to partner with Pedro Oliva, and then, you know, having the good fortune to be able to link up with Sarah and Boomer, and then be able to join up with Noria, and then finding my way to the front door of Diego Robles, and meeting up with a new friend out of Bellingham, Washington, and Willie Hinkle, and just like continuing to be able to join up with folks that are at this particular moment, at that moment, in the past, in the more recent past, right now, and hopefully into the future, still motivated. I've done some solo boating, but not too much. And it's my best experiences, my most memorable experiences were with these crews. And so in that way, it's not so much about, oh gosh, am I, you know, running the hardest shit? Did I run this drop, or did I portage my, you know, like in the tongue, I was like, fuck, I was like doing a lot of portaging, and like the biggest drops, it was just Nori and Boomer. But still, like, I have a huge sense of accomplishment from having gone through that river with them. And I've been on other trips where, like, more recently, like I was the one running some of the drops and really, you know, pushing into the hardest stuff on the river. But yet, you know, I would certainly hope that the folks with me would have just the same sense of accomplishment, because like the really scary parts, which is just having the courage to go into the river in the first place, having the courage to like, or having the patience to pull off the portages, like that's the important stuff. Just being there, being a part of the crew. And like, if you're not the person that's, you know, lined up above the drop, ready to send it, like you're probably just as important, because you're the person at the bottom that's going to pick up the pieces if things go wrong. So I think that it's I've been able to stay motivated by hopefully like just keeping a pretty broad perspective of what this actually is. And then again, just like I was saying with, you know, the difference in perspective and in motivation that Teo and I had back in the day was just like this overwhelming sense of just being like a tourist, you know, being able to go to these places and look up and see the pretty walls and, you know, think about the geology, just get overwhelmed and blown away by the beautiful creatures on the riverbank. Like there's just so much going on, let alone to talk about the history of these places, if you're just thinking about the boating history, as we were talking about on the Indus, whether you're thinking about like the ancestral history that you mentioned on the tongue. There's so much going on, you know. And one huge key player in my life that was just a single trip with Hendry Coetzee, and that was his just that was his statement and his mantra that'll hopefully stay with me for the rest of my life, which is just, pay attention to more than just the river along the way, which is hard to do sometimes, especially when it's a really sick river. It's a really hard river. It takes all your focus. There's so much more happening. And I feel like in many ways, like I'm just like scratching the surface of getting and being able to lift my perspective and being able to tell stories, because the kayak is just this ultimate vehicle. And if we can think about it in that way, as just being a vehicle, and it's, I'm not going to say that it's not important at all, because like I love when I'm able to, and it still motivates me to be able to like go run a sick rapid or be able to run a falls, or just the possibility of tapping into that adrenaline. Like that's awesome. But also, it would be awesome to be able to just really take full advantage of the kayak that gets you into these places that you wouldn't otherwise probably be able to get to, or just have any reason to go to otherwise, and be able to utilize that vehicle to lift up and be able to look and pay attention to more than just the river along the way.
Yeah, it's so interesting how you're kind of, the search is for that sort of flow state or whatever when you're in the rapid, right? When your mind's so clear, it's like you go all around the world basically for that. But then what it comes down to at the end, it was all about the people and the places, and had nothing to do, right? When you look back on all of them, like the rapids they weren't even significant in it, and like the ones you remember, it's so funny, right? I don't know, maybe you as well, but are the ones you walk away from. And I feel like the ones I really remember and can see perfectly are the ones I didn't run.
Yeah, for sure. Or the ones that my buddies ran and I didn't run.
Oh, for sure.
The one that Pedro head planted off a 130-foot waterfall. I won't. But yeah, the ones that I ran, like, yeah, it's hard to retain that memory when you're just like so focused in the moment. You're in there, like it's a nice place to be. To like, it's the perfect antidepressant, the perfect anti-anxiety to disconnect from all that other bullshit. But yeah, I think you're right. The more memorable ones are the ones where you had to come to grips with your own like mortality or your own shortcomings, walk away, and then come back. Yeah, those are pretty good lessons.
Yeah. How did you ever hook up with Hendry and end up doing that Congo trip? Did you guys meet on the White Nile or something? Or?
No, we never met. It was one of those virtual relationships, being aware of folks in the kayaking community that were on the other side of the planet. And I heard about him. I first saw him in an Alex Nix film, I think. He took him down the Murchison Falls section. And just started to hear these stories about him, started to read his blog about going down the Congo solo, and just was like, I want to do that. I want to meet up this guy. So again, that's what my kayaking career has kind of been all about. It was just like following other people, pushing it forward a little bit in my own way, but mostly just joining up with other people that I followed into these places. And yeah, there's no better example of that than Hendry, that's for sure.
Yeah. I don't know, do you want to tell a story of that expedition, or we're already told a lot, but
yeah, it doesn't seem like it would be. Have you ever heard of the Humaner's Handbook? It's like composting. We've been doing composting toilet for the last 3 years. No, 2.5. We've got some sawdust right now that's pretty good. It's hard to get good sawdust.
Yeah, I've done similar down in Baja. I would just have a bucket, put sawdust and fire ashes in it, and just go in that, and then just spread it around.
I'll send you the Humaneer's Handbook. No need to put ash in there.
No, doesn't do anything.
Ash is good for gardens, though. Apparently, it like can lower the acidity a little bit. Um. So yeah, Hendry Coetzee, man. Man, I think Hendry would have been. I think he was on his way to being like a politician, kind of like like he was already just like that was. I had first kind of been introduced to the political side of kayaking, like outside of, especially, it seems like, especially in the Eastern Hemisphere, because it's just so many more places where you need actual permission to go into some of these places, like India, Pakistan. I would have never started boating in India if it weren't for Roland Stevenson, and I never would have went to Pakistan. We would have never been able to get on the Indus without Roland Stevenson. He was an embassy kid, grew up in embassies from Delhi and Islamabad. Dad worked for the CIA, his mom worked for the embassy, and then Hendry, like, you know, I will, you can go there and go down the White Nile, but like all of a sudden Murchison Falls, you need all these permissions from the national park, and then certainly on the border of Congo, Rwanda, and Burundi, the Ruzizi River was like this 2-week lesson in international relations with Hendry, and we were on the phone for months before that particular trip, just trying to get the proper permissions, and we never ended up getting the permission to go down the Lukuga River from Lake Tanganyika down into the Congo, going the Lukuga being the connector that connects Lake Tanganyika, the second largest river on Earth, or sorry, second largest lake on Earth, second deepest lake on Earth behind Baikal, into the Congo. And we were there in Kalemi, the capital of Katanga province, the capital of the province, that eastern province there in Congo. And we just could not get the governor. Like, we were, I mean, you can only imagine, like, this, it's just so outlandish to think that we would be going to the governor's office here in that asshole Gianforte here in Montana to ask for permission to go down a river, like staying outside the governor's headquarters in order to get permission to go down a river. But that's what we were doing. And I believe it was Katanga province. Hopefully no one listens to this that has any idea, but I think it was Katanga. And we were there for like 10 days, 2 weeks, just, yes, blah, blah, blah. And it's too dangerous, blah, 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 it's too dangerous. And yeah, I mean, he ended up being, tragically right. It was like, it ended up resulting in this crazy, horrific incident, losing Hendry on that river. And he wanted to put Chris and I in jail for going down the river without permission, and then essentially being responsible for what happened to Hendry there. And
Nothing to do with Whitewater.
No, Yeah, it really wasn't. It was, yeah, that river, the Lakuga had, a few little tiny class 5 gorges on it, but it was just a big, long, flat water paddle. And, yeah, we were just halfway down the river. But we'd been boating together there for 2 months up until that point. We had gone down a really sick whitewater river in that Ruzizi. Maybe a river that'll never get done again. On the border of Rwanda, Congo there. Definitely one of the sickest rivers I've ever done.
Like, it was like just kind of boulder, super continuous.
Yeah, super continuous. Had some like bedrock underneath. Had these huge, massive rapids that we portaged. And sick little villages along the side with the people that were just so stoked to see us. And, we didn't end up getting official permission to do that one either, but but that one worked out great. Villagers came down and helped us hike out before the section of river that was really notorious for having like a crocodile that they had named. Apparently like a 20+ foot crocodile that they'd actually named because he had chomped so many people. And yeah, I guess that's like, potentially that's one thing that is certainly not something that's unique to kayaking, but something that definitely exists in our communities and in our collective mentalities. It's just this like this responsibility, this personal responsibility for our own safety and lack thereof, which I think gives us some kind of unique perspective on life. And I think in no one that I know has been able to verbalize that better than Henry. And at that particular point in his life, he was like, he had just given up alcohol. He was really making this transition in his life from the Zambezi, White Nile ultimate party scene, the NRE bar, to like a spiritualism that had really manifested in its life and it had grown in his life through kayaking. And being able to like recognize what it means to take those risks, but also being cognizant of the inherent what is a risk and what's behind it. What's the yin associated with the yang of the risk. And at that last possible moment, at that right below that like class 2+ rapid, when we had just spotted a few crocodiles slide in, it was just like boom. Happens that quick. And from what I saw happen to my dad in a car accident years before that, a decade before that, and then get kept alive in a coma by our our medical system that keeps us alive and keeps us healthy, but also can like keep us alive and torture us when we should be just letting each other go. Like, to be able to for Henry to meet his end on that river in the heart of Africa, where where he had found his life's passion, where he had transcended the reality of apartheid from South Africa, where he had
hit me hard now. Those guys that
had partnered with so many local communities on the banks of the Nile River, where he started to make his livelihood, where he had started to formulate his own
They're not trying to accomplish anything. They're not trying to be anything.
So tragic, but so.
In fact, there's been 2 of them in California,
apropos
right out of that community recently. That
for
just,
him,
That's hurt me.
Which
at
isn't
this
to say
stage.
that, like, in that last final moment,
Yeah.
that it seemed like he was ready for it.
But,
Yeah, I heard
so
about Chris
Ecuador.
the other day.
Okay. Oh, you knew it? You
But
were familiar with
it
Chris?
seems,
I heard about
looking
Chris.
back on it,
Again, he was just
it seems so
a
significant.
that I've been aware of for
And,
many years, and obviously built a lot with,
yeah, I guess
with Macy.
that's for sure. That's like
I
the toughest thing.
I never kayaked with
going
him
forward
personally,
and
but
that's the
it's
thing that
just
probably
like
makes me
community guy,
year after year
long time paddler.
the biggest battle that I
Yeah,
face
so
on the
sad.
river isn't
Wasn't
necessarily like
Macy on the river with his dad when he
the motivation.
passed on the
Like
Kings?
I feel
Was
like
that-
if anything, I'm even
Yep.
more motivated. Like
Yeah,
I feel
on the
what you
Kern,
said in terms
on
of
Port's
the
Kern.
number of sessions. Like I feel the pressure of like taking
Yeah.
advantage of these years that I
Yeah,
have left.
I mean, it's not like
But the thing that I
Definitely
battle with the
noting,
most
and
is like
obviously,
is
it's
just
not like
being
we just
able to be relaxed
stop
out
kayaking
there
and somehow we
and,
separate ourselves from that
and not
mortality, of course. Like,
get too
it's so easy to say, like, I'd rather die on the
too
river,
focused on like the
than in a car
safety
accident.
aspects
But
and the
either way,
being able to like
either way, it's tragic, right?
have that the
It's
sort
like
of
you get
child
sucked right out of
young
heaven.
Lose someone close
outlook
enough.
on class 5, which
I
is
don't
just,
want to leave
Not-
heaven.
not true.
send it, let's do it.
I like it in
Yeah,
heaven.
I mean, I don't know how one of my nephews turned out to be such a like Christian, but yeah, apparently being an animist is a bad thing. So there's a chance we might go to hell. Worshipping worshiping the planet too much, he told me. So I was like, okay, well,
Your worship.
new to me. I was like, dude, sucks.
When I was 15, my dad took my brother and I to Tibet, Nepal, Mongolia, China, just backpacking for the whole summer, living with families in Mongolia and moving their yurts and stuff. And you're going to all those, monasteries and things. And I was like, wait a second. It's the whole Christian thing is just kind of like English. It just evolved where it was. It doesn't really have anything to do with some kind of overall truth, but who knows? I think I support everybody in their beliefs. I think whatever helps you deal with being a human and like the craziness of having to deal with the yin yang world and all these hits you take is I'm all for whatever works for people.
Yeah, for sure. Deal
But
with the specter of death, and as long as you can just like not end up on Prozac or Xanax, I think that's like that's helpful too. So for my mom, Catholicism is helpful in her mentality. So I say it's and I appreciate my mom so much is that she like doesn't foist it upon me. It's like her thing. So I think that's so cool.
My mom's family's super religious too. Grandfather was a preacher and a coal miner in West Virginia and 15 kids.
Damn. Yeah.
And so
definitely got you where you are today. That's cool.
Luckily got out of West Virginia. Pretty much all the family that's out has thrived. So Ecuador, you've been going there a lot lately, you've been saying, and I remember back in the day, they had a pretty good group down there, kind of the Ecuadorian River Council with Matt Terry back then. But yeah, what's kind of the state of trying to help that situation there, or what groups are doing something, or it's kind of the status?
Yeah, Matt Terry is still the man. He's the guy who knows more than anyone, and he's a freaking you. If I want to talk to Matt though, I got to set aside a few hours. Like he's is so, like, talking about someone who pays attention to more than just the rivers along the way. Like, he's an encyclopedia. It's fascinating. Like, it'd be killer to make a proper documentary on him, but it'd be quite an endeavor with the amount of knowledge that guy has. But he is, his focus is on the judicial system, which is interesting in Ecuador because they're one of the only countries that actually has the rights of Mother Nature written into the Constitution. We don't have that here in the United States. All of the rights or human rights here in the United States, there are no rights of the natural world. Whereas that was written into the Constitution during the Carrera administration, back when Rafael Carrera was in charge of Ecuador. And then that happened, and then what's destroying Ecuador now also happened under the Rafael Carrera administration, which was the concessioning of huge tracts of land. It's a massive portion of the country that were concessioned to mining operators. And the concessions ran the gauntlet of any sort of, non-renewable resource that you can imagine, especially petroleum and especially gold. And the gold is what's really driving the destruction in the Ecuadorian Amazon at this point. The petroleum has been a disaster as well. But the gold right now, it just lends itself to, not only the decimation of the riparian habitat, the riparian jungle along these rivers, but also pollutes the water because each one of those operators utilizes mercury. So at some point in the process, they put the mercury on top that gloms onto the gold that, increases their gold harvest substantially. And then they burn it off, but it never leaves, and it goes into the water, along with all the heavy metals that get washed off in the classification process and goes into the river. And the incidence of like gastrointestinal cancer has gone up like 400% on all the folks downstream. And so, there's many organizations that are working, but this has all just erupted basically since COVID. The gold was found back in the mid 80s down in the Zamora in southern Ecuador, but that was a bunch of hard rock mining. And so the alluvial gold boom has really just been in the last 5 years at most. And we're talking about between the whole of the Ecuadorian Amazon, we're talking about tens of thousands of hectares, tens of thousands of acres of land that's been completely raised by excavators along the rivers that have been looking for gold and that have been extracting huge quantities of gold, and have gotten permission from both local and national politicians and regulators via bribes. And so, although there have been some court battles won, there's no one there to enforce this, this amazing constitutional right of Mother Nature to exist and to proliferate and to sustain human cultures. Like, all of that has just been thrown out the window. And so it's tough. It's like, what do you do? And so it's just now that, like Ecuadorian Rivers Institute, they've been really focused on hydroelectrics because hydroelectrics have been coming in to supply power to the mines. And so they do amazing work. They're heavily involved in the courts, which, to the credit of the Ecuadorian military, they are enforcing as much as is possible with, with the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Mining giving out all of these permits. They're able to at least go in and under judicial order do some anti illegal mining activities. But all of that happens because of organizations like the Ecuadorian Rivers Institute, and people can follow that on Instagram. Ecuadorian Rivers Institute has a great website. There's been some other smaller scale operations that and some initiatives. My paddling buddy Diego Robles, that I finished the Rio Chalupas with, I spent 22 days after we hiked out the first time. Noria, Chris Corbulik, Sandy McEwen, and Eric Boomer and I spent 22 days going down the Rio Chalupas from essentially like the backside of Cotopaxi down towards Tena before we evac'd via helicopter. And then over the next 2 months, Diego Robles and I partnered together to go back in, and we finished the river in 9 days. And sometime after that, he was inspired to start this kids kayaking program for the indigenous Quechua kids that live on the bank of the Hatniaku River. The Chalupas is the principal tributary of one of the big tributaries of the Hatniaku. Hatniaku is the biggest raft river in all of Ecuador, the most popular raft river. And it's also been ground zero for this alluvial mining that, since I first went to Ecuador 3 years ago, and now has just changed massively. And unfortunately not for the better. Just these huge 100 hectare large alluvial gold mines going up on either side, and these once beautiful riverbanks just being turned into piles of nasty orange fluid linking rubble. And so his goal has been to share the love and ability for kayaking with the village kids that you see swimming in the river. And these kids have turned into one of the most amazing groups of kayakers. Like, they were literally born to be whitewater kayakers. These kids are already like 3 years into the program, 2.5 years into the program. They're already running class 4 like bosses. There's a group of about 12 of them from the Hatniaku River. There are other kids programs around. So they're called the Yakuchuris. Folks can follow them on Instagram. And they're learning to kayak, and they're becoming professional river guides. But the bigger component is that they're becoming river advocates, and they're going to be hopefully lawyers and environmentalists, and from the communities that are the most affected by these crazy gold mines. And the big hope is that they will be the leaders, and they will be, the most effective anti-gold mining initiative that there is. And so there's got a lot of hope there. But I think the thing that I would encourage people to do is to just take a trip to Ecuador and do it now. Like, go see the rivers while they're still there. Like, unfortunately, the situation isn't getting any better, but fortunately for us, there's still like the treat, the beauty of going to Ecuador is still there. Like, an hour from the airport in Quito, and you can be boating on some of the world's best class 4 rivers, or class 5 if you want. Like, right there in Baeza, you're at 6,000 feet, and the climate's like eternal spring. It's like, springtime here in Montana, except every single day of the year. And then you go down to Tena, and it's hot in the jungle, and there's still monkeys in the trees, and like it's still there. Like,
the Napo province that contains Baeza and Tena is still 75% national park, and it's still like no other place. Like when you go to Colombia, like there's very few places you can go and look around and just see jungle in every direction. And still today in Tena, you go to a hilltop in Tena and look all around and you just see jungle and the Andes Mountains covered in jungle off to the west and the jungle out to the east. So I would encourage people to go. And when they go, get informed and get involved. Like that's a big hope for all of us, for us foreigners and the kayakers that live there, is that somehow the economy and the river tourism economy could hopefully someday replace this crazy extraction economy, or at least inform that extraction to be responsible. I mean, really, at the end of the day, we're not. It would be silly for us to say stop mining. But what we would want to say is do it responsibly, at least follow the regulation at a minimum. They're not supposed to use mercury. It's prohibited nationally to use mercury in gold mining, but yet we know that every single gold miner is using mercury. So we want them to do it responsibly. And we know from here in our own backyard, in the modern confines, in the strict regulation here that we have in the United States, that the miners are fucked, and they still exist by their own code, in the mining code of 1872, which essentially allows them to get away with, with ecocide, allows them to do their damage and then go bankrupt and stash their cash in some foreign bank and then just disappear. So I mean, I think anyone who pays attention to what the miners do in our own backyard here in the States, they know what the problem is. Could they do it more responsibly? For sure they could. Absolutely, 100%. Especially in Ecuador, where it's just like, most of the miners on the banks of the Hatanyaku, all they're doing is they're paying off local villagers, or they're paying off the larger mining concerns to get access to the land. They come in, do whatever. They don't even fill the holes back in, and then they leave. And this, it's the same thing that we're concerned about them doing on the South Salmon River here in the United States, is just going in, digging for 20 years, making a 400-foot tall tailings dam, and then just like disappearing and not being responsible for it after the fact. Just like, all these historic mining operations. So what I would just like encourage people to do is just get involved. And then when they go there, don't just talk about like the sick, beautiful rivers, like say something, talk to your family, because there's like so many of us that just don't even believe that mining is a problem. We walk around with like gold chains around our necks like it's something cool, when we should think about it like wearing what became the perception of people who walk around with furs on their necks, like animal furs, is just being something that's just like, it's just an awful thing to do. And the thing with gold is like, yeah, we all have it in our cellular phones. We all have it in our computers. Like there's obviously a demand for it in the technology sector, but it's a very small portion of what gold actually is. And that's like earrings and necklaces and certainly monetary instruments as well, which is driven by just like, bullshit investment stuff. That's not necessary at all. Like, so I think that just like the overall perception of what gold is, and what it's doing to the rivers, especially in Ecuador, is something that we as kayakers who see the destruction that's taking place on the riverbanks, that's something that we are in a position to communicate better to the outside world than maybe anybody else.
I like that thought of how do you think about these other things like a fur coat, right? I mean, that was so direct because it's like that animal died, now it's on your back. But these things like gold, how many animals are impacted by those type of things? That's good.
Yeah. Yeah, and the folks downstream, they're getting crazy cancers because of all the heavy metals in the water. Um, yeah, you want to take it a step further, all the prostitution and the drugs, like all the shit that's associated around the mining is bad. Um,
You have a gain,
then
you
again,
know.
like the money that's generated by the miners, if they're generating for their families, that's helpful. Like, I mean, many of us come from families that got to where we are because of resource extraction. Like my dad ran a lumber yard, so uh, it's not. It's really more about just like um, just the overall consciousness of what we're actually doing out there. And do we really need to hang like a huge piece of gold around our necks or on our earrings, or put a golden ring on? It's um, but yeah, it's I just have never seen anything like it. Never seen so destruction so quickly of one of these beautiful places that I've seen before so quickly.
Stoked you're bringing attention to it. Such a special place there.
Oh man, it's so good.
But,
It's so. I mean, I
people are
spent
so good.
I spent 31 days paddling on the chalupas. I mean, who would even just thought that was possible on a country that small? Like, yeah, you can go paddle out into the Amazon in flat water for 31 days, but this is 31 days of like the sickest kayaking you could ever possibly imagine.
Damn.
And there's a bunch of rivers like that.
Yeah.
Fucking scary, but fucking awesome rivers. And then there's a bunch of, just like you said, such classic, easy access. Like, such a good place. And then there's a Pasqua. There's an Ecuadorian Pasqua. This is Zamora River. Has the exact same, basically has the same statistics, or has the same profile as the Stikine, but it just normally has more water, and it's like, it's not roadside, but it has road access. And it's getting just completely fucked by mining, but it's there, and there. So the plan is to put an 800-foot tall dam on that river. So the time to do it is now. I've done the first day of it, but yeah, it's just like so mind-boggling. But yeah, it's definitely in the past few years, people have been changing their plans to not go to Ecuador because of reports of violence, and probably the mining stuff hasn't helped, and so it's tough. But definitely it doesn't do anyone any good for us to change our plans and not go there. That's for sure.
Yeah. Kayakers can definitely make a difference, you know. I mean, I was talking to Rob, they were going to put the North Fork in a pipe, and he started the Idaho
Yeah.
Whitewater Association to fight that. Site Z, they were already building the dang dam at Site Z. Same with the Grand Canyon, you know, both those places, like, have the dam stuff already, the tunnels and stuff blasted out, so... And it's funny how
Yeah,
it's
it's
usually one person that makes a difference, right? You know, it's like you're trying to always have a group or whatever, but gosh, it's like one person who doesn't give up on any of these issues, you know, the Matt Terrys and whoever else that just like make the difference. Got to be borderline crazy,
yeah.
but
Yeah, they were building the diversion on the Piatua when Matt and the Piatua River Defenders got it stopped against a hydroelectric company that is one of the worst actors in all of Ecuador. One of the scary, scary fucking people that'll order a hit on you, and they got it stopped against those guys. I mean, who knows if they'll be able to continue to hold them off, but you're absolutely right. Like the motivation of Matt Terry, his collaboration with the locals, like it's moved the needle.
Well, pleasure catching up, brother. Definitely look you guys up. Next time I'm in Missoula, it'll be fun to hang out.
Oh man, do it. Yeah. Yeah, come over for Locksaw season, and there's a lot of fun rivers to go do. That I don't know if you ever went over the South Fork of the Clearwater, but that's one of the best. It's like the North Fork without the train on one side.
I didn't run it at the level that I've seen you guys run it at lately. Like some of that stuff's fucking insane, but that is one of the best rivers out there. That South Clearwater, Golden Canyon.
Such a good one. And then the trip to the Selway, you go all the way up the South Clearwater and drop into Meadow Creek, and that thing is fucking sick. You go through like one of the last remnants of the old growth that made it through the Great Burn. That's such a good one. Anyways, yeah, love to see you over here. I'll hit you up when I'm in Colorado. All my family's over in Castle Rock. Maybe I'll get a chance to boat with you one of these days.
Yeah, definitely. Hitting the spring in Colorado, there's lots of fun stuff. So,
right on.
Well, take care, and thanks a lot
buddy.
for taking
Thanks
the
for
time. I really appreciate it. Tell Shine hi.
Thanks for the chat. Hell yeah.
All right.
Hit me up when the lesser thing comes out. I want to hear that shit.
All right. You'll see it. Later.
Right on. Cheers, buddy.